Just a second, folks. I'm right with you. Hello. Once again, welcome to another edition of Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. I'm your host, Lewis Bright Raven, 29-year veteran of comic, science fiction, fantasy, horror, and role-playing games as a writer, illustrator, and editor. And it is February 9th, 2022. And it's been a while since I've done reviews, so it's return of our comics news and reviews. Sorry I've been gone so long. I've been kind of under the weather health-wise the last few weeks and some other stuff going on that just haven't had the time to really dedicate to doing the content that the channel needs to do. So let's start with our questions for the week. Our first question is, what happened to you? Where have you been? Am I okay? Basically, what's been going on is I've had to go to the hospital, or not the hospital, but my doctor a few times. No COVID, but like I said, just a little bit under the weather health-wise. They're not exactly sure what's going on. They put me on a new medication, didn't work. Took me off that medication. Going to wait and see if they can figure out what they put me on. It all has to do with my diabetes and stuff. And I'm overweight and I got to lose a bunch of weight, basically. But other than that, it's been that. And because of the health, there's a lot, physical health, there's also emotional, mental depression a little bit, which has kind of affected me a little bit too. But so I've basically been trying to cope with that over the last month or so. And I've been able to do a few shows with my friend John Norris on the weekends for the movie reviews, but I just haven't really found the time to do what's necessary to produce content for the regular weekly shows. And hopefully now I can get that turned around and start producing on a regular basis again. Okay, next question. Have you been keeping up with the story about the unionization of the Image Comics production workers? Do you think that unionization is something that should be allowed in comics? Again, multiple parties asked me this. Whoops. There. I've been keeping up with the storyline. I understand that there's some tension and they're trying to figure out legal things. Personally, I don't really think that there should be unionization of the production workers, but I don't really know how the structure works at Image in that regard. They seem to want to have control over approval of who gets picked up and not picked up by the publisher. And I'm sorry, but that's not the call of the production team. That's the call of the managers and the founding members. You know, I understand what they're trying to do in a way. I mean, it kind of revolves around people like Warren Ellis and what they've been doing and they want to be able to say, no, I don't want to have to work on a person's book whose character is questionable or something like that. But unfortunately, in the real world, you don't get that kind of call. It's like saying, you were working at the printer as the print machine worker, and the manager agreed to an assignment, and you found out that this assignment has nudity in it, and you're against nudity or something, and I don't want to produce this product. Well, too bad. That's your job. So that's a little bit of a weirdness thing going on there. As far as unionization in terms of getting them proper payments or proper pay scales and stuff, that's another matter altogether. So there's some things in the unionization that are worth pursuing, but there's consequences of those pursuits. If you do give them those higher rates, that means that the cost of production is going to go up, which means there's less profit for the creators on the back end. So there's a lot of stuff going on there that isn't as cut and dry as people might think. Now, should unionization be allowed in comics as a whole? Yes, it should be, but there are caveats to that, and that pertains to what is going to qualify you for membership in the union, and whether or not you can still be employed, whether you're a union member or not, and whether or not publishers are required to be members of the union to be in the business and all other things like that. So it's not as cut and dry, and because it's not as cut and dry, is why we don't have unionization in the industry as it is. Zach asks, when will you have new guests on the show? It's only been you and the Figaro guy lately. That's John Norris, who I've had on the weekends talking about film and television shows. Next week, Thursday, I will have, give me a second. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but they got the time wrong, but it's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 17th, and I'm going to have to make sure that I get that corrected with the creator. But it's the creator who does a comic book Kickstarter. There's an alien in my toilet, and I can't think of the gentleman's name off the top of my head. He doesn't have his name on the image here that I'm looking at. Let me see if I can do a quick look for it. Samuel Vera, that there it was. Yeah, he'll be on the show next week, and that'll be Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, not 7. I need to make sure that is corrected because he's got it listed as 7 p.m. and it's a little Eastern. So I will try and make sure that that is corrected with him in the meantime. Our next question is from Santos Rodriguez. And it's, how come you aren't drawing more comics pages on your live draw show? Thought you said we were going to see more of that this year. Again, basically been dealing with not feeling well, and but yeah, that's going to come here shortly, hopefully in the weeks to come. Thank you for asking, Santos. Mike asks, would you go work as an editor for Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, IW, Tal, etc.? This Mike is a person who's a member of the Comic Book Editors Alliance, which is a Facebook group I'm a member of. And there's been some job offerings presented at DC and IDW recently. And he just, basically, well, why haven't you, send in a resume is basically what they're asking me. And the main reason I'm not is because when you work for them, you kind of have to be able to relocate and be in their home offices. And I'm not in a position to do that right now. I'd have to be able to sell my home on short notice. I'd have to relocate my disabled father cross country from South Carolina to California, where IDW and DC offices are located. There'd be a lot of things involved that would make me not necessarily less desirable as an editorial candidate for the positions, but there's other people who are probably as qualified, who are closer in locale. That would be just as good of a choice for them, or better for that reason. And I know that, so I guess I know when it's not really a good fit, unless someone's offering me a full cost of moving and everything in the job description of what was offered, and I didn't see that in any of the descriptions. So that's why I'm not pursuing that. Now, if there was a circumstance with a company where I could relocate, or I could work from home and not have to relocate, but which in today's COVID society, yes, you can work from home a lot more often than you used to be able to. But when you're talking about an associate editor or a head editor position, you really do need to be in the office. So again, it has to do with the realities of cost of living and moving and doing stuff like that. So if something comes about where that situation is resolved, then yeah, maybe I'll look into it and pursue it. And that is all of our questions for this week. So if you have questions, email me at quothravenlbr72@gmail.com, subject QDR Q&A. All right, then. Let's go ahead and talk about what I got in the store today. Got quite a bit of stuff in the comic shop this week. A lot of it was actually back ordered from last year. Diamond has a ton of stuff they didn't ship me last year, so I'm just getting whatever comes in as back orders on a week-to-week basis. But first, I got the Map Maker trade paperback from Scout. And this is $14.99, and it is by Ben Slayback and Francesca Carita. I believe you can read that. Looks pretty cool. I think I did a quick review of the one shot that Scout released as a preview book earlier last year. So I don't know exactly when I'm going to get to this, but I will review it. I've got quite a stuff I'm way behind on. I'm over a month and a half behind on reviews. Let's see. We've got Daisy number 3 of 5, I think. Yes, 3 of 5 from Dark Horse Comics by Colin Lorimer with Joanna LaFuente and Jim Campbell. And I don't think I reviewed, I may have reviewed the first issue, but I know I didn't review issue number 2, so I'm probably going to review all 3 of them in the future. It is a 5-issue limited series. We have Last Flight Out, number 4 of 6. This is the Mark Guggenheim, Eduardo Ferragamo project, where the scientist is trying to get his daughter back from Chicago to the West Coast so they can get on the last flight off the planet before the planet gets destroyed. We have Norse Mythology 3, issue number 1 from Neil Gaiman, P. Russell, David Rubin, and Galen Showman. $3.99. We have Mega number 2 from Stonebot Publishing, I think it's called. I haven't read issue 1 yet. Let's see. Stonebot Comics, okay. But it's Mega, and that's, like kaiju monster book there. Very reflective, shiny, glossy cover stock. I apologize for the shine of the computer screen. There's really nothing I can do about it. We have the trade comic book, trade paperback called The Sleepover. This is from Razor Bill Books, Penguin Books. And it's basically a teenage horror event type comic by Michael Regina. We have Another Kind by Kate May and Trevor Breen. And this is HarperCollins, or Harper Alley, which is a division of HarperCollins Books. As you can see, I get a lot of trades. And lastly, this week, again, I apologize for the sheen because the plastic's still on it. I've got the Monster Nocturnals Omnibus from Dark Horse. Pretty thick monster book here. Hardcover edition. I don't know what all this collects. Let's see. Black Planet, Pumpkinheads, Carnival of Beasts, and Trollbridge. So, and if you just heard, that's our mascot Midnight. Oh, what's the boy got? Oh, come here. Little monster kitty. Oh, come here. Come here, baby. You want to be on TV or not? No. I'm going to lay down. All right. But that's what I got this week so far. I might get some more stuff tomorrow and on Friday, depending on what's going on, because my store's supposed to be getting extra shipments from Diamond this week because they're trying to get caught up on. Now, there he is. You see him in the corner? You see him over there? You see him over there? Come here. Come here. There he is. There he is. Everybody wants to see the Midnight. There's the kitty. He hasn't been on TV in a while. He likes to let people know he's still around. But so anyway, if I get any more content this week, I'll let you guys know. This weekend, probably. So, without further ado, let's get into our reviews for the week. We have back issue 132 for $9.95, publisher Tomorrow's Publishing, with various writers and artists involved for ages 13 and up. It is an interview and historical review magazine, and it was originally released in December of 2021. And what it's about, this issue's theme is 1980s Marvel Limited Series. Every article is about a popular mini series that was published in the 1980s by Marvel, typically with an interview of the writer of the said miniseries, though sometimes also the artists were included as well. This was a great period in Marvel history, and the articles are very well presented. It features the 1982 Wolverine miniseries by Chris Claremont, Frank Miller, and Joseph Rubinstein, followed by an article on the Falcon from 1983 by Jim Owsley, also known as Christopher Priest. Paul Smith did the first issue, and then Mark M.D. Bright finished the rest of the series because Paul had moved on to the Uncanny X-Men assignment by that point. Long story short, that book came out in 83, but it was originally pitched in 81. I think they had 2 or 3 years while it was being developed and before it got released. Followed by another article on the miniseries Magic, Storm and Ileana, released in 83 by Chris Claremont, John Buscema, and Tom Palmer. Then the Machine Man miniseries from 84, written by Tom DeFalco, with art by Herb Trimpe and Barry Windsor-Smith. That's Trimpe pencils and Windsor-Smith doing the finished art. And it looks very, I didn't realize that Trimpe, I don't know if I didn't realize, I might not have remembered that Trimpe had something to do with it. But then when I saw the artwork, I could see the Trimpe in it, even with Windsor-Smith's finished art. Next up in the magazine is an article on Kitty Pryde and Wolverine that was released in over 84 and 85 by Chris Claremont and Al Milgrom. A lot of Claremont stuff, as you can see. Next was Iceman, released in 84, written by J.M. DeMatteis and drawn by Paul Kupperberg with Mike Zeck doing covers. Then they move on to the interview with Stephen Grant, where he talks about the 1985 Punisher Circle of Blood miniseries, which was just the Punisher. It became Circle of Blood later when it was collected, but it was the classic 85 miniseries that Grant did with artist Mike Zeck. Still more interviews are conducted with Claremont, Alan Milgrom, and Roger Stern discussing their varied Versus miniseries. That's Fantastic Four versus X-Men, X-Men versus Avengers, Mephisto versus everyone in the Marvel Universe, Nick Fury versus S.H.I.E.L.D. by Bob Harris, Paul Murray, and Ken DeMalder has been reviewed. And then we have David F. Walker, popular author of more recent vintage, interviews Peter B. Gillis and Dennis Cowan about the 1984-1988 four-issue Black Panther series that dealt with apartheid in South Africa. It was originally slated to be released in 84, but it didn't get officially released by Marvel until 1988, which was after Jim Shooter was kicked out of the company. Shooter had originally approved the book, but then wouldn't print it after it was produced because of the sensitivity of the subject matter involving apartheid and what was going on in South Africa at the time. He just, I don't know, he got cold feet or whatever, but once Shooter was removed, the book was released. And there's yet more articles about other series as well included. My thoughts on this is a really excellent issue of the magazine. There wasn't a single article that I didn't find interesting and engaging. Of course, some of these miniseries are some of my favorite Marvel stories of all time, specifically Kitty Pryde and Wolverine, the Punisher story, Circle of Blood. And reading the articles on those topics gave me, some entertainment and stuff. But I also found a newfound appreciation for some of these stories that I had bought and read, but I wasn't necessarily that fond of, or I didn't remember liking that much in hindsight. Example, I was not a fan of Roger Stern's X-Men versus Avengers, but it turns out that Marvel kind of wrecked the plot, and he had to bail out on the series in the middle of the series, and he didn't write the final issue, among other problems that were going on with the book. In fact, the artist was replaced the final issue as well. It was originally drawn by Mark Silvestri for the first 3 issues, and I think Keith Pollard did the final issue. Even the article on the Wolfpack miniseries, which was something I've never even looked at, it made me think that maybe I should try hunting up that miniseries out of a quarter bin sometime. Again, this book is rated for ages 13 and up, and I give it 5 stars. Our next book is Comic Book Creator number 25, again, $9.95 from publisher 2 Miles Publishing, featuring various writers and artists. It's a retro review interview book, released July 2021. Similar to back issue, it just has all interviews with creators and not retrospective on particular books. whereas back issue often does articles that aren't necessarily talking to the creators, just a retrospective on certain books, although this back issue had a lot of interviews. This main feature, as you can tell by the cover, is an interview with Barry Windsor Smith, often talking about his most recent project, Monsters, from Fantagraphics. But there was also some other stuff in the history of that story in conjunction with Marvel and other things going on as well in that article. Also featured in this magazine are interviews with Rick Leonardi, largely about his time on the Spider-Man 2099 miniseries with writer Peter David, and with Sal Cortuccio, who is the founder of SQP Productions, as well as a longtime fanzine and early art print producer in the 1970s and early 1980s. That was part one of that interview, and it's an excellent interview. Just fascinating stuff that he was talking about. All the different prints he used to do with Frazetta and Bernie Wrightson and Jeffrey Catherine Jones, everybody that was in the studio except for Barry Windsor Smith. For some reason, the Barry Windsor Smith portfolio didn't get made. But there was some stuff he did with Neil Adams at the time, all that sort of thing. It was very interesting to read about. And then there's an interview with writer Rob Guillory about his Image series Farmhand as well. This was one of the many items that I've ordered from Diamond last year that my retailer is only now just getting in the store. This arrived last week, and this came out like July or August of last year, so it tells you how screwed up Diamond is. The Barry Windsor Smith interview is good, but it's a little long in my opinion. I enjoyed the Leonardi interview, but I wish they had talked about other projects besides focusing on Spidey 2099. I was never a big fan of that series. Again, the Quartuccio interview, which is only the part one, was the best of the lot in my opinion, because it talks so much about the 1970s fanzine scene at the time and how tight-knit the comics community at that time was, particularly since so many of them were centered in the greater New York City and New Jersey area. Hadn't quite gotten to the national scope at that time due to the lack of technology more than anything else. But very fascinating stuff. And I hope I get to manage to get more of this magazine, future issues, so I can get the rest of the Quartuccio interview without having to wait at least 6 months after the fact. It is recommended for ages 14 and up. So 13 and up, because there's a little bit more adult-oriented content in this one. But I think if you're interested in the history of comics, it'll be fine. I give it 5 stars as well. Our next magazine is Mutiny Magazine, number 1. It's $15. This is the cover B by Gene Ha that's depicted. There's 3 different covers. The publisher is Fair Square Comics Limited Liability Corporation, LLC. It's an anthology magazine, so again, there's various writers and artists, and there's different genres. It's a 98-page book, full color, prestige format, nice oversized format. It was released originally in November of 2021. And this is a combination anthology magazine comprised of interviews with mainstream and indie creators, articles discussing what's going on in the industry, and features original comic stories. It has very nice production. Again, it's perfect bound, full color, very nice paper quality. I mainly bought it because Gene Ha, who's a friend of mine who did this cover, I thought he had an original story in the book as well. Because this cover reminded me a little bit of a project that he used to do back in the day, and I thought maybe this was sort of not from that, but something that he had control over. Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, he doesn't have a story. It's just the cover, and that's a little bit disappointing for me. But there is plenty of content worth my time and worth one's time and money. I did particularly like the article about how 50% or more of DC's releases were Batman related, and the thoughts that were expressed on that. There's an opening statement about the exodus of talent from DC and Marvel, and how it sort of feels like the same sort of situation as what led the Image 7 to leave Marvel. I don't really think that's the case, because those guys left Marvel because they were overpaid and over-marketed. Today's talent is leaving because they aren't earning enough at the big two to stay there exclusively. I think a lot of people would stay if they were actually getting paid. The interviews were okay. They're not as strong as the Tomorrow's magazines, but they're not fodder interviews. They're well done. The article about Felix the Cat, new Felix the Cat comics with creator Tracy Yardley, was pretty cool. They have an article about cybersex in comics. It kind of misleads the audience. It's more about the relationships between androids and robots over the history of comics, like Scarlet Witch with the Vision, or Jocasta and Machine Man, or stuff like that, rather than having to do with cybersex in comics. And so I didn't really care for that kind of a swerve there a little bit, because that's a much darker topic of discussion. And if you're going to go talk about it, you can talk about it, but then that's a more darker, adult-oriented topic and subject matter, I should think. I'm going to quickly show you guys the book, because I didn't scan it. The main reason I didn't scan it is because it's nice, perfect bound, pretty thick. Again, it is 98 pages. This is the first book. Mutiny is Unity. Let me go ahead and take it out of the plastic. And as you can see, it's quite large, oversized book. And again, the exodus hasn't begun again, but has it really? And again, they're aware it's not really like Image situation in the early 90s, but there is different things. Again, there were 3 covers. One has the main cover is from Derek Robertson and Tony Avina, and then there were 3. There was actually 4 covers on this, so quite a bit of stuff in there. I can't remember the character's name. That is the main cover, but it's like Homeland or Home Guard or whatever from The Boys. And so that was that. There's interviews with Stephanie Phillips, Garth Ennis, Ray Anthony Height, Maria Lovett, who does Faithless in Porcelain over at Image, and an interview with Sal Buscema, which is a nice throwback. Again, the Felix the Cat article with Tracy Yardley. There's a sketch interview with artist Andrea Muddy, or Muddy. They talk about the Darkhold and whether it debuted in WandaVision or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And it not really. It appeared elsewhere. How much Batman is too much Batman? Again, that's the article about the fact that over half their DC's product is Batman related. Again, stuff like that. And then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 original comic books: Kilowatch, No Future, Memory Box, The Red Cedar, Canopy, and Jaeger, and Internal. And there's a lot of variety of styles and quality in the book. It's worth your time. It is $15, but again, high quality material. Here's what one of the interview with Garth Ennis looks like. Think of it as getting kind of a cross between a back issue and a Dark Horse Presents type book, all in one. And again, it's around 100 pages. It's 98 pages, so certainly worth the money. One problem I am having with this is getting it back in the bag, though. I think I'll wait until after the show to worry about that. Okay. Again, that is, it wasn't quite as good as Back Issue or Creator Pro as the interviews go. The comics are all solid, but nothing really stood out to me as something to really talk extensively about. But any one of them would have fit in Heavy Metal or Dark Horse Presents or Negative Burn or any other classic anthology magazines if they fit the right theme and to be included at the time. It is certainly a respectable comics magazine. I do wonder, however, whether it'll get a fair shake from retailers and fans. I didn't hear about it, and I wouldn't have heard about it or gotten it without Gene, the cover artist, telling me about it. And I'm one of the people in comics who actually looks for this kind of magazine. So I do think this needs to be spotlighted more, and I may try to get the publisher editor Fabrice Sapolsky on the show in the future as a guest to talk about this more, because this probably isn't getting the kind of exposure that the book deserves. It is recommended for ages 16 up due to language and adult situations, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Our next book is Shudder, #1. We're going to talk about Shudder a lot. We got the first 3 issues to discuss, but here is #1 from Warrant Publishing for $5.95. It features writers Lou Mogan, Steve Ringenberg, Don Glutt, Billy Grimm, and Artie Godwin. The artists featured are Benito Gallego, Nick Palilco, I'll pronounce that. I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing that name. Carlos Lamani, Santos Ceballos, Reno Maniqui, Sean Van Briesen, and I didn't spell that. It's Mansour there's a U after the Y in there, but Mansour Damon or Damon. Genre is horror and dark fantasy anthology. It was originally released. I think I received it in October 8th. It may have come out in September. This is a modern day revival of the classic Warren Comics magazines of the late 1960s and early 1970s, such as Creepy and Eerie Magazine, brought back in this new edition under this new brand by some of the same creators who worked on those titles back in the day. This series is bi-monthly, black and white, printed on newsprint, and is very reminiscent of the classic black and white magazines of the 1960s and 1970s of this nature. This particular issue features 7 stories, including Das Frankenstein Corpse. The Nazis make an army of the Frankenstein monster soldiers, but when the soldiers realize they're simply fodder and their masters don't see them as anything but disposable, they revolt, led by the original Frankenstein monster himself. Very well drawn by Benito Gallego. Story, not the best, but the art carries the story well enough that it's enjoyable. The next book is Hellship. A man looking for his missing brother gets shanghaied by pirates, and they try to force him to serve as a slave on their ship out at sea. And it turns out these pirates also got his brother, and they threw him overboard months earlier, and his brother's drowned to death. Only it turns out that the man in question is a werewolf, and he transforms by the light of the moon and takes out the crew and destroys the ship. Solid work by Ringenberg as writer and Polico as the artist. Exhumed Vetting is about a hunter who just takes the pelts of the game he hunts so he can sell it later. He learns that his rich brother has recently died. He travels from Africa back to the States, where he's informed that his brother left him nothing and that all of his money will go to charity, but they haven't found his money yet. So the hunter goes to the old home, his brother's house, to try and discover where his brother hid the money, with gruesome consequences. I'm not going to spoil the story for you. It is quite well done, both artistically and in terms of the story itself. Legacy of the Vampire is the next story. It's a tale about vampire hunters who try to determine who the vampire is during a hunt at a mansion and kill the vampire. To fail means their own deaths or even worse. It's a nice short. It's nice. It's straight to the point. Has a simple twist ending at the end. It's a well-executed story by Billy Grimm as writer and Santos Zabalos as the artist. The next story is Voodoo Moon. A group of mercenaries in Africa murder a village when the shaman refuses to tell them where the diamonds that these mercenaries assume the villagers stole are hidden. And after they've wiped out the village, the shaman curses them, and the villagers later rise up as zombies and attack the mercenaries. Another very simple, straightforward story, well executed, written by Wingenberg and drawn by Reno Manakwe. BEM, aka Bug-Eyed Monster. This is a great science fiction horror story where an alien is found in space, brought back to Earth, where he becomes a celebrity actor on a Star Trek type science fiction TV show. Only in the season finale, he starts murdering the cast live because he was really a scout for an invading alien armada. Best story of this issue. It's funny, it's quirky, but it has just the right edge at the end for the twist. This issue is concluded with the story When I Was Dead. It's a sort of lackluster tale about a man who sees a ghost, dies, and then thinks he's still alive, and his reaction to everyone else around who cannot see him or his spirit after they find his body. It is well drawn by Monsieur Damon, but it is a kind of a dull story in terms of the story itself. I do recommend it for ages 14 and up. I give it 3.5 stars as an overall book. Let's see if we can show you some of the artwork here. We can. Okay. This is the BEM story with art by Sean Van Briesen. This is the first 2 pages of it. And then this is the artwork by Monsieur Damon for When I Was Dead. And I apologize for some of the reflectiveness on this. It doesn't capture quite the same quality as the printed on the scan. But this is a very watercolorish, black and white tone, watercolor tones throughout this very well executed illustrative work. Issue number 2 is $5.95, and it features writers Don Glutt, Billy Grimm, Bambos Giorgio, E.F. Benson, and Artie Godwin. Artie Godwin adapting a short fiction story by E.F. Benson, and Bob Fisher, with artist Kelly Jones, probably most famous for his Batman work in the 90s. Reno Manakwe, Benito Gallego, Santos Zabalos, Nick Paloquo, and Odell Nora. Again, it's a horror dark fantasy anthology. This was released on December 1st, 2021. And again, this features most of the same artists and writers, but there are a few new entries, most notably Kelly Jones, who draws the first story in the industry, which is Halloween. This cover is by San Julian in this case. And, it's a homage to the first story by Jones and Glutt. Straightforward story about a bimbo whose car runs out of gas on her way home from a Halloween costume party where she's dressed as a witch, as you can see, out in the woods with no cell phone service, and she runs across a werewolf. She flees to a farmhouse, and I won't spoil the twist ending, but I think the cover can pretty much give it away for you. Jones does a really nice job on the art, but it is kind of a pretty blasé, obvious story idea. The next story is Who's the Dummy? It's about a ventriloquist who learns that his wife and his manager are having an affair. Soon they are found killed in an automobile accident with the car's brake lines cut. The police arrest the ventriloquist because they assume he cut the lines, and he tries to tell them that it was his dummy that did the act. The man's put on trial, he's found guilty, and he's sentenced to death by electrocution. Strapped into the chair with with the prison guards and other witnesses watching. The switch is thrown, and then comes the twist, which I won't reveal. But Manaqui does a really nice job drawing it, and Billy Grimm probably wrote the best story of this particular issue with this particular story. The next story is Flesh for Fantasy. A Hollywood producer and old school science fiction, special effects fan tries to learn the secrets of the old school special effects artist. He's a late master effects artist who has died, and he does figure out the secret of the guy's success, but it's not what he expects, and it's gruesome. Benito Gallego does a really nice job drawing the story, but it's a fairly by-the-numbers script by Bambos Giorgio. At the Farmhouse is the next story, adapted from the short fiction story by E.F. Benson, by Artie Godwin for the writer. It's about a man who marries a woman who is rumored to come from a dark family of witches, and when they fall out of love, he decides to murder her, in part because he thinks she may really be a witch. Zabalos' art style is nice, but the visual storytelling in this particular story isn't his best work. The next story is Under His Heads. It's just an average story by Don Glutt and Nick Polico. There's not much to write about there. Hell to Pay is about a gunfighter who wakes up in hell, and he has to pay the ferryman on the River Styx, and he gets another man. He shoots another man for a coin to pay the ferry because he doesn't have a coin to pay the ferryman. So he steals the coin off the guy he just shot, not knowing that the person that he just shot went to hell for counterfeiting money. So, of course, the coin is fake, and the ferryman tosses the gunfighter into the River Styx to be pulled down by the souls that are drowned in the river underneath. It's a cute story, cute twist at the end. Overall, solid issue again, recommended for ages 14 up. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. A little bit better overall issue than issue 1. Even though they had a couple of lacklusters, their stronger stories in this one, for their best stories, are a little bit stronger than in issue number 1. Here's the art by Kelly Jones for Happy Halloween. And most of these stories are only 4 to 6 pages, so there's pretty fast, and they have to get in and out with the storytelling. And this is the artwork from Who's the Dummy by Reno Manaqui. Really well drawn stuff here. Really nice realism. I love the lighting and shading effects on this guy's work a lot. And then this is the artwork by Santos Zabalos for At the Farmhouse. And it's really nice looking art. I really like it. But as far as the story structure, it's not the absolute best I've seen from Zabalos over the years. But it is nice to look at stylistically. And lastly, we have Shudder number 3 for $5.95 from Warren Publishing. Writers are Lynn Marone, Don Glutt, M.R. James, and Artie Godwin. Artie Godwin adapting another famous horror fiction short story. Steve Ringenberg and Lou Mogan. Artists are Mansur Daman, Carlos Lamani, Santos Zabalos, Reno Manaqui, Riddell Nora, and Nick Polico. Horror Dark Fantasy Anthology, released just last week. So you can probably find this one very easily in stores if they carry it. Cover by Jeff Jones. This issue features 6 short stories in a one-page inside front cover mini story, as did issue number 2, compared to issue number 1, 7 stories. Again, Jeff Jones does do the cover for this issue. And this issue's stories are the Brethren, where a Viking hunter lost in the winter wilderness is rescued by a woman who takes him to her village. At first, the villagers are skeptical of him, but they take him in. Soon, however, their food low. Some of the villagers take a potion, and they are led to a storage area where they are seemingly, it's like they took a poison, and went and laid down and died, type thing. More than half the village undergoes this process, but the remaining villagers are still starving. So the Viking hunter sneaks into where the bodies are kept and starts chopping up the bodies and cooking them for the rest of the survivors. But when spring comes, however, the hunter is horrified as the villagers begin to be awakened, as the potion was only meant to keep them in hibernation and it was not a death poison. Stupid Viking hunter, don't you all know that you always cremate your dead? It is a great story, though. It's some nice artwork. Again, this is by Lynn. Let me go back real quick here. Sorry about that. Lynn Marone and Mansour Damon. That's what I was trying to think of. The next one is Dismember the Alamo. This is kind of a weak story about a vampire who feeds on the soldiers before they are attacked by Santa Anna's forces at the Alamo. It's the weakest story I've seen, story content-wise, in this magazine so far. The art's nice, but the story is just, not the best thing I've seen. Next book is Lost Hearts, or next story, I should say, is Lost Hearts, which is another adaptation of a classic horror story by Artie Godwin. Again, M.R. James does the original fiction story that was based upon. This is the tale of Stephen Elliott, a young orphan boy who is sent to stay with his much older cousin, Mr. Abney, at a remote country mansion, Aswarby Hall in Lincolnshire. His cousin is a reclusive alchemist, obsessed with making himself immortal, and Stephen is repeatedly troubled by visions of a young gypsy girl and a traveling Italian boy with their hearts missing. It's a reasonable adaptation. Same team that did The Farmhouse, but a little bit better art in terms of doing the visual storytelling this time. Tomb of the Mummy is the next story. This is another Hollywood horror twist story. Each one of the magazines has had one. BM was kind of a Hollywood horror twist. Then they did another one and the second one, and then this is the third one. In this story, it's a director who has acquired a legit Egyptian mummy for their movie. He treats everyone on set like crap, and they have an Egyptologist who realizes that the director intends to burn the mummy to ashes, desecrating it. So instead, he prays to the Egyptian god Anubis for aid, and the director has a heart attack just as the scene where the mummy is about to get flamed is shot. And his soul is placed in the body of the mummy, and he can't speak, so he fries. It's not my favorite story, and I wish they'd held it for another few issues before they ran it, because they've already done enough work from Don Gillette. And they'd already done the Hollywood horror theme in the first two issues. It made me wonder if they're always going to have a Hollywood horror story. The next story is The Cleaner. A vampire works for the mob as a person who gets rid of their dead bodies, often feeding upon them as he can if the bodies are recently dead enough. But this time, the victim is the governor. And the head mob boss who ordered the hit doesn't trust this cleaner not to squeal. He doesn't know that the cleaner's a vampire. So he sends hitmen after him. Well, of course, the vampire turns. And as the mob boss keeps sending hitmen to kill the vampire, he just keeps turning him and making his own mob crew until he has enough men to take out the mob. And this is all told in 6 pages. So imagine today's idiot writers like Brian Michael Bendis or Jeff Johns trying to write this story. They turn into a 6-trade paperback long saga instead of 6 pages. It just tells you, you don't need to do the long epic to get a story told and done well. Lastly is BYOB. It's about a truck driver who makes deliveries to an odd truck stop diner in the middle of nowhere. He never delivers the usual fare to the restaurant, though. There's no meats at all. The driver is curious as to how this restaurant stays in business. His boss tells him to let it be, but he sneaks into the place, and you can guess what BYOB means. It isn't booze and it isn't blood. It's another meh idea, but the art is well done. My thoughts is this is not as strong of an issue as the first two issues. Alamo and BYOB just aren't that strong, and Mummy was too redundant in tone to the previous issues' Hollywood horror stories, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 as a result. But here, I do think that Shudder is a really nice throwback magazine, though. You may remember I had Grant Lakard on a while back, and I reviewed his book Memoirs of the Morbid. And I think that's what this is what he's trying to do, is this type of magazine. He just doesn't have the same kind of budget or connections for this level of talent on his version. But for the people that he hires for his budget, it's very similar stuff. I would hope, however, that Warren Publishing starts hiring some writers like Brian K. Morris or Grant, or writers like Bobby Nash, and pair them with these artists or other artists. I could see Aaron Lepresti doing a nice story for this magazine. Kyle Holtz by himself or teamed up with Jason Moore inking would be a shoe-in option to have someone draw for this. But I really don't know what the company's budget is like. I just hope that they expand beyond their core group of former Warren talent. Not that there's anything wrong with their Warren talent. All of them do very nice work. I just want to see a little more variety is all. Mm-hmm. And this is the art for The Brethren by Mansour Damon, or Damon. And this is artwork from Tomb of the Mummy by Reno Manaqui. Again, very well drawn. Really nice facial expressions. Great lighting and shadow effects. Great depth perception in the whole thing. Really impressive work. I wish that Marvel and DC would hire artists like these for their regular books, but that's like asking too much, I think. And then this is BYOB with art by Nick Pellico, who does a nice job here. Again, a lot of different techniques here. You can see he's in the rain, and you see different things going on. Some nice quality watercolor, water brush effects. Mixed with good hard line art inking. John Norris says good evening, just on for a few minutes. Hey, John. So, if Grant happens to see this, make sure you get a copy of the Shudder magazine. I'm sure it will inspire you to get Memoirs of the Morbid up a few more notches, because I know you guys can do it. And that's pretty much our reviews for tonight. And so Friday will be our next episode. Let's see if I've got it in here. I don't, of course. Why would I have it? Let me see if I've got... There we go. All right. On Friday, 8 p.m., John will be joining me, John Figueroa Norris, and we'll be discussing Max Fleischer's Superman of 1941 and 42 theatrical shorts from Max Fleischer's Animation Studios. And that's what we're doing on Friday. So join us then. If you enjoyed this video, or you think others might, please hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons to continue to get content from my channel. As always, I thank you for watching and for your support. Again, I'll be back on Friday with John to talk about the Fleischer Superman cartoon, and then possibly some additional stuff that's later this weekend, but we haven't finalized that just yet. If you have questions or you want to reach out to me, I can be found on Facebook at Lewis.BrightRaven, at Twitter at LewisBrightRave2. You can see more of my artwork at deviantart.com/BrightRaven. You've been watching Quoth the Raven, Lewis Brightraven exclusively on YouTube. You have questions, you want to inquire to maybe commission some artwork from me or something, Quoth the Raven, LBR72@gmail.com is the address to reach out to me at. I'll get back to you within a day or two. Try LewisBrightRaven@yahoo.com. As always, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time. Have a good night.